Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon and Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth. And the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Anthony Paluska and Dean McMahon. Hey, Dean, how are you?
Doing great. Still in the few weeks of wonderful weather here.
How was the camping trip?
It was great. Just returned, had 3 grandchildren and their dads. It was great. I have the really important role of providing the place and the food. Yeah.
There you go.
Just a really high value add kind of guy there.
Everybody ate well. The weather was nice. So
the weather was nice. We had, as you would expect, lots of beef because we're guys. Yeah. So
that's good. Well, great. So the conversation today, and I'll let you talk a little bit about the J21A crew. Steve and Martin, 2 experts on the topic of professional services. They've lived in the space and now they're participating in trying to help develop consultants and consulting organizations and PS teams. And they play in a very similar space to us. And so because of that, and I think you picked this up in the conversation, we see the world very similarly. But I think between all of us talking through this together, we can dive into some topics and hopefully provide some perspective across a wide range of organizations across the globe that could be beneficial to anybody that's listening, trying to elevate or take their PS team to the next level. So, Dean, speak a little bit about kind of just the nature of this conversation. We went a bit long with them, so we'll be a bit short here in the intro, but provide a little bit of the kind of the background and what your key takeaways were from the conversation.
Yeah, a very interesting one. Someone asked me the other day when we were preparing for this, why in the world would you have a competitor on? And that just cracked me up. I said, no, we don't look at it that way. First of all, we're all trying to help our industry. The other thing you need to know today, it's a little SaaS focused, but the principles apply to any embedded PS where you're not a pure play, right? All these principles apply. I think and it was a little bit like getting together with family but we've all touched the beast in some different ways, right? What I like, and we will definitely have them back, what I like is it's a place where you can explore a little more assertively the challenges that are in the world today with some people that are seeing them and experience them and are not that others would be, but are thinking about them long term. And then you can explore, what does that mean? Where are they? What are the real things? And this goes right along with the study that you did last year, that it's all changing. And I think that's the key message. My takeaway is PS, SaaS particularly, is going to change. SaaS is compressing its valuations. And once it becomes normal value, which has big impacts on itself, we're not doing that today, has big impacts on private equity and venture capital and people trying to become wealthy. But just for a second, as it compresses, revenue per account and the normal business model of PS has an opportunity to change. And that puts pressure on the PS execs. That puts pressure on organizations, and we explore all that. And I think that's an exciting topic. So I'm very excited about this. So much so at the end of the call, while we were doing the wait for the thing, I offered to go to the UK and see these guys.
Yeah. Well, I think you're just always looking for a trip to go to Europe, but
swing over to France.
Any opportunity you see, you will take advantage of there. But no, and if you followed us for a long time, right? Our core business model and philosophy on the consulting side has always been around, right, customer intimacy and the role that services can play in driving growth, enterprise growth. And so many of our clients and organizations that went through it over the years, as you know, right, they wrestled with this exact same thing, which is services has, and professional services and advisory services even has a bit of this superpower in that it can solve problems in ways that your product alone cannot. So you can start to bring full solutions, you can tailor those to markets, you can do all the things that lots of organizations want to get to. We spend a lot of time talking about SaaS in this conversation, to your point, but the reason we talk about it is all the reasons you just said, which is, hey, the point in time where that market is going through a very similar transition and transformation that a lot of other markets across the world have gone through is because of those things that you mentioned, right? There's this changing of a mindset that's starting to occur, and we talk a lot about services-led growth. As you mentioned, we highlighted it in the report we did last year. We've written a handful of pieces this year on services-led growth, by the way, of blogs, and we can link to some of those. And this year's study is specific to services-led growth and where organizations are in that transformation. So the topic just lined up perfectly once we started connecting with Steve and Martin on this topic. And as you'll see here, when we transition it, it flows pretty naturally. So hope everybody enjoys it. Hey, Steve. Hey, Martin. Well, welcome to the show.
Hey there. Thank you very much. Great to be
here. How are you
here.
both doing today?
All good.
Wonderful. Very good. Wonderful. So I'll have given a little bit of an intro prior to this, but please introduce yourselves before we dive into the topic, and set some of the context for who you are, your background, and also who J21A is.
Yeah, and in your childhood, please start with any trauma, anything that you want to. And hey, lay down on the couch. We'll walk through it.
So hi, my name's Martin Roxby. I've worked in professional services and tech for many decades, despite my youthful appearance. Currently at J21A, where we spend our time helping professional services organizations and tech sort of develop out their consulting skills and the commercial awareness, basically bring up their teams to perform in a professional manner in front of clients.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Steve?
Steve Beckley, also J21A. I have been in the IT industry for fully 46 years because I started at the age of 5, which gave me a significant advantage. But seriously, I've been in the IT industry, like Martin, for probably far too many decades. Most of it leading technical teams who are client-facing, and the vast majority of that leading professional services. I started out as a technician. I moved into consultancy and ended up in management for my sins.
Great. So you all both, through your experience and then through your firm, spend lots of times working with professional services leaders, with technology firms that are right at a bit of an inflection point right now, right? For a variety of reasons. I'm curious, what are you all seeing as some of the biggest, or maybe the biggest trends that are happening for these services organizations, these PS firms, these IT groups? I mean, categorize it how you will. Like, what are some of the things that are different in the past 12 to 18 months than they have been for most of the rest of your career working in this space?
Yeah, well, I think one of the themes that we've definitely seen in the last 18 months is this thing around services-led growth. And this is not where particularly sort of SaaS professional services teams have started, where it has really been just about, doing base implementation and just getting the work done to get, people onboarded and products up and running. It's a really challenging time in the SaaS market at the moment. And, product-led growth is not that easy anymore. Everyone in a product company wants to do product-led growth. That's what they want. They want the value to be in the product and it sells itself. And some products work that way, but a lot of them don't. And particularly if you're trying to push into enterprise or public sector, it's really, really difficult to do product-led growth. And that's not because of your products, because the complexity of the environment you're in. So, then they start thinking, well, let's try sales-led growth, which is typically how you break into the enterprise model. Let's get some AEs, let's get a pre-sales team, let's go in, let's demo our product, let's talk to the client about what the value is they're trying to get out of that, and try and convince them to make a purchasing decision in our favor. And, that can work, and I think that is needed. But it also has some challenges, because in sales-led growth, you're still salespeople And I started out in sales. I know what it's like. So you're still salespeople, and you're talking about a potential future, and that's what your competitors are talking about as well. And really, you're talking about feature and function comparison, trying to convince the client that the ROI from buying your product is going to be better than buying another product. But the ROI models are exactly the same for all products. So you can differentiate on what price, you can lower your prices, but that's not really a value play. So again, sales-led growth can be quite challenging. Whereas service-led growth is a different perspective. It's about bringing people in who really understand the outcomes because they've been there, they've done it, they've delivered it. And one of the fundamental changes in perspective is to realize that the reason that people buy technology is not because they don't have enough technology. They've got plenty of technology. They buy it because they've got a problem that they need solving. We all know that. You can't solve that through a sales conversation, because the salespeople haven't really done that. They haven't really been there. And actually what clients are looking for is not, what's the lowest price I can buy this technology for. What they're looking for is the lowest investment risk. You can have a worse product and a higher price and still win against your competitors if the client thinks, actually, if I go with this, I'm far more likely to get the outcomes I want, because all of that uncertainty, these people have convinced me they've done it before in similar organizations, that they've learned the lessons and they've delivered the outcomes. And that's what service-led growth is really about, is convincing people that you're a safe pair of hands. Go with this services proposition because that will get you what you want, which is the outcome, not the product. So I think that's one of the things. Some people think services-led growth is just about expansion. We do land with our sales team, services go and expand it. But I think it's twofold. One, you've got to expand, but the other side is, how do we get net new sales with a more compelling, interesting conversation that de-risks the client's investment decision? Steve, any view?
Yeah, I think it's probably worth stating that Martin and I have sufficient time in the industry that we predate SaaS as a delivery mechanism. And back in those days, investors were less hung up on the proportion of revenues that came from product versus services, for example. That changed massively with the dawn of SaaS as a discipline and as a business model. Because people became, perhaps quite rightly, obsessed with the kind of growth figures they could expect from SaaS, with minimal deployments, no installation. And so for a long time, we went through a period where investors were really keen to see services kept to a minimum. If you started to creep above, say, 20% of services from your revenues, there might be some twitchiness on the board or from your investors. But I think what we've seen, as Martin said, in the last 18 months or so, is a realization that if you want to get big and become a household name and break into large enterprise and big public sector, that you have to accept some of this stuff can only be done on the back of services and effectively expansion, but from a post-sales point of view.
I love what you're saying. And so I spent the last week or so talking to a lot of private equity about the compression of SaaS valuations. And I heard a theme that was pretty consistent to what we're saying today, except for one thing. So the theme was, if SaaS is going to have normal valuation, which it will eventually have, then account growth value, to Martin's oblique comment, it matters, right? If the land grab's over, and when the land grab's over, you can trade some accounts, but you can't really do what you used to do. But their central theme was, what we have to understand is everyone who manages a SaaS company only knows one business model. And they are fundamentally, religiously against PS. And the example the guy gave me, and it was one of the gentlemen, it was so good. He goes, what other business would have customer success instead of PS to give away free service, and then move engineering forward to, again, put people who shouldn't be in front of clients just so we don't charge them? Right. So what we have to remember, even though they need this revolution, and matter of fact, we just did a study on it, and you guys probably read, they need it. We are working literally at this moment anyway, against the fundamental belief of the people who run SaaS. And the other comment he made is, remember, the people who run SaaS aren't really running the company, they're running a stock play. They're not investing their life for this company to be there like General Electric. They're going to write it and make a transaction, and that's what they know and how they do it. So we are on, if you will, truth of the future working against fundamental beliefs. So have y'all come across that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we try and get across to PS leaders all the time is, don't assume that anyone outside of PS understands what PS does. Your CEO, your CFO, your CPO, your CMO, anyone on the C-suite, they may know you exist, but they don't know what you do. And if you leave it at that, then there's a huge risk, because they will make decisions based on, Dean, to your point, their view on how these businesses run. And their view does not include an understanding of what PS does. So PS leaders need to spend time working with the C-suite on really educating them, not just on what PS does today, but what PS could do for them. And, this is really, really crucial. If you're going to have a strategic role in the organization, is to make sure that the people in the C-suite are talking about the value that PS brings to their specific missions, rather than it's just they're producing some, non-recurring billable revenue to cover some of their costs of goods sold. If that's the space you're in, you're going to get optimized and ignored. But some of the things that, if you go and speak to the C-suite and what they care about and look at what's driving the valuations, there's some unique things that PS can do, if allowed to do them, that can really help support that case. So, really important, we've got out of this sort of hyper growth thing for SaaS, where the only thing that was important on valuations was new logos, net new business, just growing from new business. That's become unsustainable. It now is all about margin and a real test of renewability. These things you keep selling every year, how many of them are renewing, so that you do even recover your costs against sort of customer lifetime value? If that's 18 months, 2 years, if you're not renewing across that period, you're just basically losing money on every transaction. So they're looking for greater renewability and, a greater propensity that the business is really viable in the long term. And this is something that PS should be focused on. But if PS is in a box doing, a 5-day onboarding exercise with every single sale of software, they're not affecting in any way that customer lifetime value performance, because they finish too quickly. They do too little. They haven't understood the client's context. They haven't understood the problem space, and they haven't helped the clients solve the problem. By solving the problem, you create the value. By creating the value, the client will stay with you. The client stays with you, your valuations go up, and people have more confidence as investors in what your organization is doing. So I think it's really important. But you can, we often talk about, working with the C-suite. PS has got a unique value proposition for everyone on the C-suite. They've all got different objectives. They've all got strategic objectives that all tie up to what the CEO is trying to do. But often PS isn't involved in that. PS doesn't know what they're doing for the CMO, the CPO, the CFO. They don't have a strategy that joins up what we do to what's important to the C-suite. I think that's the fundamental change. If you really want to be seen as valuable, you've got to talk in the language that the C-suite cares about and identify the key things they're trying to get done and say, we can help you with that. We can do these things. Because they won't know. They won't come asking. So I think that's one of the things we need to look at.
Yeah, Steve. So as we deal with this this transition, and we all spend all our time talking to PS leaders, and we're all trying to help them through some of the same mechanisms. But I want to know, Steve, how you think the transition is going to go, and from that, for all of us, when does that become a meaningful market that we can really help? But secondary to Martin's earlier point, the PS leaders themselves, I don't want to say they don't believe, but they haven't had experience bringing the organization along with them, and we talk to hundreds of these as you do. many of them like the ease of what they do today, right? Many of them have never asked for budget. Dot dot dot. So, Steve, how does this journey begin to make it a viable place to help?
Sure. Thanks, Dean. I think there's a couple of different strands there. Firstly, I mean, talking about forward deployed engineers, which is, we've seen ridiculous figures about the amount of hiring that's going on at the moment. It's very much the trending topic. And as you mentioned, certain companies are using forward deployed as a way of not charging for services. And I think where people are using forward deployed engineers as a strategy for really building a product kind of ahead of time with a very small number of lighthouse customers that sort of define an industry or a vertical market, I think that's probably going to work out okay. But companies that are using forward deploy engineers free of charge, effectively doing professional services for free, that's not a sustainable business model. They have to find a way to monetize that if they're doing it for more than a very minimal number of clients. And so that's going to come home to roost. And I think clients who've been using it across the board as a strategy are going to realize they have to start charging for those services through one mechanism or another. They can build it into product costs, they can charge for hours, or whatever they feel is appropriate. But that is a time bomb that's going to go off at some point. You cannot just keep throwing expensive bodies at these kind of problems. If you're delivering a toolkit to the client rather than a finished product, I get that you need people out there to do the data and business analysis and the business process re-engineering with the client to bring that together so that for that client you have a finished application that does what needs doing. But ultimately that has to be paid for by someone, and it's got to be the client. So that will come home to roost. So on the second point about PS leadership's own belief in their future and their strategy, and let's be honest, with the constant worrying and wringing of hands about AI, it's understandable. Certainly the most hyped technology since I've been in the industry, which, as I mentioned, is rather too long. I think there's an important need for PS to form communities, and we'll probably touch on this a bit more later as well. You mentioned customer success. That's an example of a discipline that has done something I've never seen before in terms of forming communities of interests and communities of practice. And I think professional services really needs to do the same. And certainly Martin and I would encourage people to become a part of communities and learn from each other, because, as you mentioned, there are many people who were born into professional services post SaaS, and they only have a limited view typically of what PS could be or should be, because it's been minimized by investor preference for growth around product, and so minimized services to get a product live. As we all know, professional services can be so much more than that. There is a huge spectrum of practice upon which every service we deliver is based and fits in somewhere, that can go right up to advisory services. Obviously not necessarily application vendors trying to compete with the big four or anything like that, but even a software vendor, an application vendor that works into a single vertical market, very specialized, can provide advisory services. If they know the industry and they know their clients well enough, they can compare and contrast organizations working in a similar space, and look at things just above the technology layer in terms of how the industry is moving forward, and advise accordingly.
Totally agree with and love the idea of leveraging the broader community of people that have been through a similar journey to you to gain insights and knowledge from it. And in a large part, that's what we're trying to accomplish here, because independent of your industry, independent of any of those things, the lessons learned when somebody transforms from being product led to being services led or solutions led or what have you, there's a lot of patterns that are the same. And so our it kind of that leads into this little kind of framework that, as I listened to you all talking through this, I want to try and maybe break down a bit. um, the first one is, right, services led growth can and should be a significant growth driver for many organizations out there, particularly when they hit some stage of maturity where product or sales led growth don't work anymore. That's our consulting organization, McMahon and Ransford, is focused on that for forever, right? I mean, from the foundation of the firm, it's in and around that challenge. But in a lot of those cases, it wasn't necessarily the PS leader making the case that we need to be more strategically important. It was market dynamics and conditions from executives or business line leaders or those kinds of things that were saying, hey, we need to do this. How can we become more customer focused, solutions focused, service focused? Oh, great. We have this arm within our team. We have this capability, or we can build this capability to solve that. So there is an interesting dynamic here where you all are seeing it, we're seeing it. A lot of this push has to come from the PS leader rather than the top down in the organization, which creates an interesting dynamic in SaaS. Because here's the three pieces, right? The C suite does not understand, right? PS leader tries to make the case of we can be more strategic, and everybody says we don't even understand what you do. And to the extent they do understand what you do, to Martin's point, your current value prop as a PS leader doesn't really align to the future state value prop. You might be doing short-term implementation type projects that are not driving the growth through services that you could if you were doing that, because that's the box that you've been put in within your organization. And hence, so you have to go down this path of, okay, let's rethink what our strategy needs to be and get organizational alignment around what is the role professional services needs to play in the organization. Because we're going to have to rethink the value prop and what we offer. That's an internal value prop just as much as it's an external one. So I know you both have thought a lot about how to move the C-suite along in their understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that can happen unless you get everybody sitting down, rethinking what the strategy is. Because if you just try and get the C-suite to understand PS playing a more meaningful role, and they look at what they're doing today, there's too much of a disconnect for you to get the buy-in and the support needed to actually go on that journey. Is that the way you all see it?
Yeah, I think there's a really important point here, and it's about having a strategy. You know, we always say that PS is a business within a business. You know, it does all of the things that a business does. It works out what people want to buy, it develops services, it markets them, it sells them, it delivers them. Okay, it brings in revenue, it's got finance, it's got operations, it's got an HR function to manage people. So it's a business within a business. Now, no other business would operate without a strategy, but the strategy becomes really important because you're not ever going to have the mandate in PS to drive a services-led growth approach if you do not have buy-in. And no one's going to give you buy-in if you don't have a defined strategy that outlines everything that's required for that to happen. You can't just suddenly turn it on, say, right, next Monday, we're going to be service-led growth. We're not going to tell anyone else about it. We'll just do it, and they'll see how brilliant we are. It won't work. You've really got to try and work out the value prop, the changes you need to make, all of the investment you need to get, and you need to take that and work with the C-suite on getting that validated. Because if they don't validate it, you don't have the mission, and you can't go and execute it. But as long as you go back and talk to them, not about what you need from them, but what you can do for them, if you change the mode of operation and the function that PS operates in, then they should be more amenable to it. If you have your KPIs aligned with the things that the business cares about, not the operational metrics of running an efficient PS organization, they will understand, oh, I can see we're going to get this impact on ARR or NRR or anything that they care about. we're going to have this many references, we're going to improve our win rate by X amount percent. These are things, if you can go and say, look, this is how we can help you do that, they're going to say, that's brilliant. How do we get that working? It's not going to be easy. No one's going to pretend it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But if you don't do it, I think there's a real sort of existential threat. I think if you're just a PS lead and looks inwardly and tries to optimize operations, that's a very short road. You can only optimize for a very short period of time to get any return. And then where do you go?
Well, and Martin, on that particular point, because and Dean mentioned the study and the survey that we did last year at this time, we shared it with you all. But the one thing that did jump out and become clear is the role, the crisis almost of the actual role of PS leader if they're operating in the old model. Because if you want to continue to grow and move through your career and grow a business that is thriving, you have to move into this direction, or else there's just too many other things that will continue to commoditize you within your own organization. So just from a personal career development standpoint, if you're that PS leader, you almost need to be thinking about how can we add more value to the organization, and then how do we communicate that so that we can get the support and the investment necessary to do so. So I do think that there is this moment here for PS leaders to step up and play an even more strategic role in their organization. But if they don't, they end up running the risk of being relegated even further down their org than they already are in some of these SaaS organizations.
I think maybe that's the lever. Maybe the lever to help them is the understanding that, to take what Anthony said, I don't think they'll be pushed down. I think they'll be replaced. I think in a moment, leadership will change either intellectually or just new leaders, which is the norm in SaaS. I have a daughter who's an executive with a SaaS company. She's had 4 or 5 CEOs. So, because the land grab's over, right? So anyway, they're going to not understand you, care about you, because they don't care today. So they go, oh, you're incapable of doing this. I'll just get a new one. So maybe the lever to really get them engaged is just primal fear that you've got to upgrade. If you want to upgrade the organization, want to upgrade you want to have a career path outside of this company, then you need to at least begin to listen and understand. And these are great people, by the way. We all know them. They're wonderful people. That's not about them. It's about, and I think Steve said this, maybe Martin, but hey, they don't know anything else, right? So our job, and we're probably the 2 organizations that I know of that are actually trying to work this issue in the whole globe, is to help them see, hey, this is about you. It's about you. It's about your own success and happiness and joyfulness. And don't get caught in this, this will change one day, right? This will change one day. I won't have hair when that happens, but hey, I don't have hair now. So, it's not going to be that big of a drawback. But yeah, I think, and I'd like to hear y'all's view on using, this explicit statement about themselves.
Yes, Martin and I agonize over this because, how harsh are you in terms of the message? Dean, you mentioned this earlier. There are some PS leaders who are happy and comfortable with where they're at today. But they need to not be kidding themselves that that's going to last. Nothing stays the same. Everything changes. And so you've got to be an agent of change for your own destiny. And as Anthony, you put it, for you developing your own career. And so PS leaders have to find a way and have to accept that it's their responsibility to find a way to paint a compelling picture for the C-suite, for their senior leadership peers, to see the art of the possible and how things could be. And no one's going to do it with them, but they have to take responsibility for doing that. And as Martin says, don't think it's going to be easy. It's not one presentation and you're done. But this is constantly lobbying and chipping away at the attitudes, so that you can make this decision as a company, because as certainly one of you said already, you can't decide to do this on your own as PS. I mean, you can start trying to find leads and clients that you're engaged with, but you're not going to move the needle if you're not doing it as a strategic motion that the whole company understands.
And then maybe the second message is that if we can get your head right, as the organizations are going through a transition, we can get you thinking right. Then it gets to be the belief we four have very clearly. Our truest belief is you are, whether you like it or not, in a people business. And we always use the analogy that, and this will really play well because it's a baseball analogy. And I know how much Steve and Martin play baseball, and it's central to their core that when the shortstops gets the balls in a pro game, he already needs to know what to do in that situation. That's PS to me in a nutshell. So when we cascade down off the leader, we need to immediately make her understand now you want to play in the new game. These people have to play that game, and they can be equipped, they can change, but you can't get the buggy too far ahead of the horses in this case.
Martin and I see, unfortunately, far too often examples where that PS leader's not getting that right. There are far too many PS leaders getting made redundant, looking for work, and in our experience, they're generally being replaced by someone from customer success or someone from ops.
Well, yeah, and you can tell that just based on how many of the chief customer officers come out of PS versus customer success, right? The vast majority of them have the customer success kind of background, which tells you something about how the organization views CS versus PS and that risk of replacement there.
Absolutely. And although customer success has clearly gone through, and to an extent still is going through, its own identity crisis around do we need to be more technical or more commercial, what I think most of them have done successfully is made it understood that customer success, when done properly, is a commercial organization and has a commercial impact, and a very significant one. And all power to them for doing that. But people need to understand that pre-SaaS, before we got hung up on what percentage of revenues came from service, that was absolutely the case. Your PS leader would typically be on the senior leadership team because they were driving a significant amount of revenue, and most importantly, adoption.
I completely agree, and I want to shift gears a little bit, because now that we've properly scared all of our PS leader audience out there that you're going to be replaced and all these bad things are going to happen to you if you don't act now, I'd like to actually give them some tactics and some guidance on, okay, so I want to do something about this. How do I go forward with this? So Martin, you touched on this a little bit earlier. I know you all have a framework and a way. You spent a lot of time thinking about how to message to each of the different members of the C-suite to get their buy-in and to get some alignment around PS playing this more strategic role. Maybe just take a couple of them and give some examples as tactically as you can on, hey, the CFO, if you're working with him or her, this is how you need to think about communicating. Here are the metrics that you need to message. Here's the overall story you need to tell, and take a couple of those, and then let's see if we can give everybody a couple of things that they can go and try and apply.
Yeah, so I'll go through a few tactical examples because I think they are useful. But before I do that, there's a context there. Well, why would you do this? The point here is to develop a strategy that is aligned to the business and what the business requires. And why, as a PS lead, should you be developing a strategy? It's to give you two things: delegated authority to make decisions for your PS organization, and discretionary budget to invest in the things that you need to do. So that the point of doing this is to empower the PS leader to be able to do the things they need to do. So going back to then speaking to the C-suite and what might be of interest to them. So for instance, you could look at the CMO. So what's this CMO interested in? Well, they're definitely very interested in making sure that the marketplace is aware of the benefits that the organization brings to customers in that marketplace. So PS has got a unique view on how customers respond to the introduction of this technology, this product into their environment, and making it work and delivering the outcomes. So PS can produce, out of every single engagement, I always say, they should always be able to produce something that marketing is interested in. Either it's just a new logo, oh, we did this. It's an anonymized case study. We worked with this client in this sector. This is where we started. This is what we did. This is the outcome they got. whether it's a named reference, whether it's someone standing up at the marketing sponsored, company event talking to all your prospects about the great things you did. There's a range of things that you can get in that reference spectrum. The CMO is massively under pressure from sales. Can you provide us with new testimonies that are going to convince our clients to come with us rather than someone else? And PS is the only one who can give that lifestyle back in there. So I think that's one of the key ones, the CMO. The CFO is really interested in things like ARR, renewability, growth. Well, if PS is just doing implementations, you don't have a story. If PS goes and said, look, the number one reason for churn is adoption, okay? What we're going to do is focus not so much on just the implementation, but on adoption. We're going to spend more time with the clients to make sure they get their problems solved. If you solve the problem, as I said earlier, they'll stay with you. Your churn numbers will start coming down, which reduces a lot of friction that happens in the rest of the organization, either having to supplement churn with net new business, try and recover customers, or, all the forecasting's out. So with the CFO, you want to be talking about the impact you can make on improving the financial stability and predictability of the revenue that you bring in. And you can do this across all of them. The CPO would love it if you could actually provide real feedback in terms of the features people like, engage with easily, the things they're really looking for, to help prioritize what they've got in their backlog in terms of things that are going to make a real impact to organizations, or the things they really struggle with, because you've built something into the product, but every time services go, they always have a lot of time trying to get this bit, people to engage with that part of the product. So there's always things that you can do that no other part of the organization can do. PS are the only people out there with the clients seeing what the impact of selling a product and implementing a product has. And if they do the right things, they can support every member of the C-suite. I won't list them all, but you can basically do it for every single person on the C-suite. Go and ask them, what's your top of mind? And then come up with the proposition that PS is uniquely positioned to do, and then do that.
Earlier I liked your comment that we have to, I forget how you put it, but let's say whittle down. We've got to communicate and communicate and communicate because, and I think Steve said this, you can't do this as one and done. You're really on a journey of education, and you maybe buy into a time frame of, hey, I'm going to spend this entire year meeting my goals, but transforming the view of us and the steps that Martin's laid out, because it's going to be one of the most interesting. One of the private equity guys I talked to is running one of their companies right now, didn't know the name of the person that runs PS. Right? I asked him, I said, well, should I meet with your PS leader? He goes, yeah, I don't really know their name.
Oh boy.
That's worrying.
Yeah. So, but hey, they're going to go through the to Anthony. The hope is your company's going through this transformation. The horse is out of the gate, right? Okay, let's accept that. You may not see it yet, you may not feel it yet, but you should be on the leading edge of education.
Yeah. The market will require that you participate in this way at some point in time, because your growth will plateau. Something will happen organizationally that's going to require this change. You, as the PS leader, need to start collecting those data points, telling that story now, so that you have the buy-in and the support to get in front of the market, or at least be ready to act as soon as the market starts telling you that there's some issues in place. And I'll pick on a conversation I was having last week. PS organization within a large IT services company, and we were having conversation. Wait, what are some of the things that you're doing right now that you're really focusing on with your team and you're adding value? And it's a coaching client of ours. And they're saying, well, we uncover a lot of new opportunities and we bring sales into those conversations. Oh, okay, that's great. Like upsell and expansion, net new or current account growth and expansion. Great. And the other thing we do is we come in like 90 days out, right around the same time that CS gets involved, and we are actually contributing to securing renewals because the clients will call us to consume some of the hours that we had left on our program. But what we are ultimately doing is making sure that they're getting the most value out of it at the point in time that we're coming up for a renewal on the service contract. And so we said, oh, I mean, those are great. Those are great things. Those are quantifiable. Those add value, to Martin's point, to two different functions in the organization, right? You can translate the activities that you're doing, not just the PS outcomes, but to business outcomes. And so we said, all right, are you tracking how many of those leads get generated from you all and handed off? Well, no. Do you have any idea of how often you get pulled into one of these situations and it actually results in a renewal, but you would have thought that they were at risk prior to that? Well, no, we don't compare the. All right, so like you're often already doing a lot of these things because you know it's the right thing to do as the organization, but collecting those data points, telling that story, showing that trend line over, even if you're not communicating to anybody yet, right? Anything that your organization is doing that is impacting the broader business goals and outcomes, start tracking that information so that when you're ready to tell that story, you have data to support it. And we had a conversation, one of our very first podcasts, with a guest, Michael Turner, and that was his point. He's like, I was collecting data and communicating for 12 months before anybody even listened to me about what I was doing here, because it was just the repetition of, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're doing, and this is not necessarily what they're asking for, but these are the things we're doing that you'll ultimately care about once I can show you how to connect those dots. So I think that's one of my lessons and takeaways from this is like, start tracking that information now and start thinking strategically about how your business is helping the broader company, and because all of that information will be helpful. Curious, as we close out a little bit here, we'll go around the horn. Any key takeaways or lessons that each of you want to leave the audience with as we talk about this? Steve, your face popped up first, so I'll start with you.
Sure. No, I just wanted to expand on your point, Anthony.
Sure, of course.
Or just reinforce it actually, which is, start collecting the data for the KPIs that will be important to your business forward looking, not the past.
You don't have to have the organization convinced yet of where you're headed for you
Exactly.
to know that you're ultimately moving in a direction to play that more strategic role and start collecting the supporting evidence to make that case when the time comes.
Exactly. And the other thing I'd like to say is, even if you're a SaaS company today and you have a professional services function, but it's still doing a bare minimum of product implementations, at least you have something to build on. You can get somewhere from where you're at. It's within line of sight, and you can work with your PS leader to look at what this might look like in 3-4 years' time. Hopefully, you're not exiting the business before then. There are SaaS companies who've taken the view that services should be minimal to the extreme, where they've actually outsourced their entire implementation process. They have no professional services capability whatsoever, and very minimal customer success, if that. They lack the strategic agility to make this pivot for the future, which is going to hit everyone ultimately.
Martin, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so just one thing I'll point out. PS has a superpower that no one else has. It's time cards. Okay, PS, unlike any other part of the organization, can get really detailed on where they spend their time. You can identify how much of your time has been linked into supporting sales. If you record it, you can work out how much time you've spent developing case studies and assets to improve the efficiency of your business, but also support sales. If you track it, you can track all of the leads that you generated because you worked on this project and identified this opportunity and raised this nominated lead in your CRM system. No one else has that granular view of time. And if you do that well, it's a really good way of demonstrating where the time is spent in PS supporting things more than just doing the billable utilization. I worked in one organization where their time cards did two things. Detail on what was the billable utilization, really good. Everything else was in a bucket. It was admin. No one cared. No one really cared about what was in there. Just tell me what your billable was. But that non-billable stuff, that's where all your strategic work happens. You need to unpack that, get it tracked and measured, and feed that back up to the C-suite and tell them this is where we're spending time, investing time to support the rest of the business succeeding. So do not underestimate the power that time cards can bring you if you do them properly. So I think that for me is one of the big takeaways.
Yeah, that's a really good thought to leave on, Martin and Steve. Hey, thank you guys so much. I can't tell you, it was like going back to see your family, after a long visit to get together. It was just wonderful, and we'll have you guys back again really soon.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, Anthony and Dean. It's very kind. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for all the insights and for the conversation. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Well, if you enjoyed that conversation with Martin and Steve and want to hear more like it, follow, like, subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify to make sure you get the latest episodes. Also, if you want to participate in this year's study on services-led growth, which is going to be launching here soon, please reach out to us and we'll get you on the list. You can be the first one to access the report and the insights and some of the best practices that come out of that particular study. We'll be starting that in April. If you want to get in contact with Dean or myself, you can find us on our LinkedIn pages, or you can email us at podcast@consultantsway.com. Looking forward to hearing from everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.